Once the money started coming in from outside, those little corner mosques started to grow, and they started to be, they started to have marble and chandeliers and expensive carpets, and the local Maulvi was no longer one of the locals, and he could be someone from outside, and he was driving a four-wheel drive car, and he had armed people with him, and it changed the whole landscape of Pakistan.
I know there's a phenomenon in Pakistan, also in India as well, of something called ghost schools, where buildings are constructed, school buildings are constructed, salaries are paid to teachers, and nobody shows up, there are no students. It speaks to the very fundamental weakness of public education.
That's right, and that is one of the reasons why the madrasas also became popular, because there is a real desire among people to have their children be educated, to read and write. And if there is no public education, if there are no schools nearby where children can go, and if the only nearby place where the child can learn to read and write is a madrasa, where he's also going to be fed and clothed and looked after and given a wallop or two if he misbehaves, well, then that's where they will send their children. And but I should point out here that I think the indoctrination of Pakistanis hasn't just been through madrasas. I think the so-called secular education system has really failed us as well. We have the textbooks that we are teaching in regular schools really need serious overhaul, and there have been attempts to overhaul them, but every time there's such an outcry from the so-called religious lobby that the attempts just stop. Where you have people, I mean, there's a document, I think one of the good exposés on this was called The Subtle Subversion, brought out by the SDPI, and if somebody searches it at sdpi.org and searches for the subtle subversion, there should be a PDF available, which is a study done about 10 years ago, maybe in 2002 perhaps, or 3, about what the schools, what they're teaching in the schools, not just in religious studies, but in history, in geography, in other studies.
And SDPI is an acronym for?
Sustainable Development Institute. It's an institute based in Islamabad, and they've done a lot of good work.
Turning to some media coverage, many so-called reports and many so-called experts and analysts see Pakistan not as a nation, a country of people, but as a problem. The plethora of adjectives are almost all pejorative. Violent, unstable, fractured, unreliable, untrustworthy, double-crossing, double-dealing, and the most dangerous country in the world. For example, here's a cover story from the Atlantic magazine entitled "The Ally from Hell." This is the lead. Pakistan lies. It hosted Osama bin Laden, knowingly or not. Its government is barely functional. It hates the democracy next door. It is home to both radical jihadis and to a large and growing nuclear arsenal, which it fears the U.S. will seize. Its intelligence service sponsors terrorists who attack American troops. With a friend like this, who needs enemies?
Well, yes, but as we just discussed, for this friend to become the way it has become has taken a lot of doing, and a lot of things have happened to make it the way it is. And also, that's a pretty incomplete description of Pakistan. Yes, all that is true, and yes, there are problems, and Pakistan is a problem, and it's most of all a problem for the people who live in it. The people, we in Pakistan are the ones who suffer from the laws that General Zia imposed, and some of them they've managed to take the bite out of them somewhat, but not completely. The education system, as we talked about, and so many other things, and also this, of course, completely ignores the fact, this description and this article completely ignores the fact that democracy in Pakistan has not been allowed to take root, that when military dictators have taken over, countries like the United States have supported them. And so when we have become a mess, it's not just, it is also, of course, our own fault, but please don't just blame us alone.
Another article in the...
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. just want to add to that, we do not hate the democracy next door. We are jealous of the democracy next door. We envy the democracy next door. We want to be like the democracy next door. And that is why we want peace with India. That is why an overwhelming number of Pakistanis want peace with India. This is the biggest fallacy to say that Pakistanis hate Indians, because that is not true. And we've seen this umpteen times. When there were the test matches taking place, the cricket test matches taking place, and thousands of Indians were given visas to come to Pakistan. This was not like a convention in a closed door thing. This was people on the street, thousands of people on the streets, visiting the shops, talking to taking public transport, meeting strangers, and they loved it, and people loved them, and shopkeepers were giving them discounts or not charging money. Taxi drivers weren't taking fares from them. And incidentally, Pakistanis had the same experience when they go to India, when they went for the cricket match in Mohali in 2011. Many of them couldn't find hotel rooms to stay in, and strangers offered their houses, come and stay with us. I mean, it's not, the people of Pakistan and India do not hate each other. It's the governments that have formed policies that have kept the people apart, that make it impossible almost to visit each other. There are ridiculous visa restrictions on both sides. We are the same people, we have the same culture, we speak the same language. The Indian journalist who just came to Karachi recently from the Bombay Press Club, the Press Club of Bombay, and it's a funny story. So I think the president of the press club of Bombay, and as he's coming into Pakistan, he's telling the person at the customs or the immigration, will I have a problem with the language here because I don't speak Urdu? So the man said, but you're speaking it. He thought he was speaking Hindi, but Hindi and Urdu are so similar, and it's the same. We understand each other. So it's not like France and Germany, which were two complete separate ethnic identities and separate languages, food, and the people were enemies of each other during those wars. The people of Pakistan and India are not enemies, and we don't want to be enemies.
Yet you have two of the largest armies and military forces in the world facing off.
Well, we didn't ask them to do that. They do that for their own reasons, and I think that they're completely, out of date. They're completely out of touch with what the people want. I mean, right now what's happening is that the business communities of both countries are joining hands and really moving forward to work together in the IT sector and the health sector. I've been working with this initiative called Aman Ki Asha, which is, if you check it out on the web, it's AmankiAsha.com, Aman Ki Asha. And Aman Ki Asha is an initiative started by the Times of India and the Jung Group of Pakistan, the two biggest media companies. But it's not just it's a concept that has really become, people now say things like, well, that's very Aman Ki Asha of you, meaning that and Aman Ki Asha means hope for peace, and it's triggered off dozens of attempts, initiatives around both countries with school children and other people. And you have the Rotarians are working with Aman Ki Asha. The Rotary clubs in Pakistan and India are working together, and they're sending children from Pakistan who have heart diseases to India for life-saving surgeries, because Pakistan does not have that technology or that training, and they're also training Pakistani surgeons to be able to start doing that. And Pakistani Rotarians are paying for Indian children to be able to receive that treatment in India as well. It's called Heart to Heart, that initiative. And the Pakistani Rotarians, how do they send their money to India? Via Chicago, through the Rotary Club, Rotary International in Chicago, because Pakistan and India, next door to each other, don't have the bank exchanges that make that possible. So I mean, there's so much happening on the ground, but if you read the newspapers or you listen to the TV or whatever, you think that all we ever do is fight, and that's not true.
One of the unresolved issues between India and Pakistan from the 1947 partition is Kashmir. 1/3 of it today is in Pakistani hands, 2/3 is in Indian hands. Initially, perhaps Kashmiris in 1947 were interested in unifying with the new state of Pakistan, but since then a rebellion has been launched, and I've been there several times, and it seems to me that most Kashmiris, at least on the Indian side, would want independence now rather than unification with Pakistan, and even there's talk of unifying the two Kashmirs. What are your views on the Kashmir question?
Well, when it comes to unifying the two Kashmirs, I think for once India and Pakistan would find themselves on the same page because neither of them want that. Pakistan would want to keep its side of Kashmir, India wants to keep its side of Kashmir. And I think that you're absolutely right. The Kashmiris that I have interacted with and met, I have never been to the Indian side of Kashmir because they don't give visas. But the people that I have met, they don't want to be part of Pakistan, and I don't blame them. Why should they? But they don't want to be part of India either. Although that is still a sort of open question, because if India plays its cards right and allows the democratic process, to enter Kashmir as it has started to do, and if it removes the armed forces from India, which is the heaviest concentration of soldiers per population anywhere in the world, I believe, and if it removes the APSA, I believe, the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, which prevents any kind of redress to to any wrong committed by a soldier. If they start taking those steps, they might find that Kashmiris don't feel the need for independence. But I can't speak to that right now because we don't know that right now. They haven't done that. The repression continues in Kashmir. On the Pakistan side, also there is a lot of restrictions. You know what I find heartbreaking, David? It's that the problem of Kashmir, the issue of Kashmir, this is something that the Pakistan-India People's Forum for Peace and Democracy, a people-to-people group that started in 1994, articulated the issue of Kashmir in a way that I think has found resonance now in the public discourse of both countries after 15 years. Over these 15 years, and that is that Kashmir should not be treated as a territorial dispute or a piece of real estate between India and Pakistan, but as a matter of the lives and aspirations of the Kashmiri people, who should be allowed to have a say in their future. And that is what is starting to happen. I see the germs of that starting to happen. But what's really heartbreaking is to see the divided families. There was a young boy, maybe 16 years old, and he had gone on holiday on the Pakistani side of Kashmir, and he happened to be just trekking about with his family, and he saw these three men sitting on a rock looking across the river at the Indian side of Kashmir. And they sat there for hours, and then somebody told him that their families on the other side. They crossed over and they haven't been able to go back. So he talked to those men, and then he wrote a small piece and he sent it to me, and we printed it in Naman Ki Asha, and he took pictures also. And it was a heartbreaking story. They just sit there and they stare at each other, the families, across the river. They can't speak to each other because the roar of the water of that mountainous river rushing down is too loud. And sometimes, if they are allowed to, then people throw each other gifts and things across the river, letters wrapped in stones, and that's how sometimes they conduct, ceremonies like engagements and things, and it's that. But I do see progress. I mean, there are now 2 bus services that connect the 2 sides of Kashmir. But it's very, very difficult for people to get the permits to be on those buses, and then you only can do it. You cannot do it all the time, and it can carry only a limited number of passengers. I mean, there should be soft borders. What we want is something like the South Asian Union, like the EU. If France and Germany, which were such bitter enemies, can be friends and have if there can be a soft borders situation in Europe, why can't we have that in South Asia?